Right, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 10:02 on October 7th, 2022. This meeting or webinar is being recorded. Thank you all for attending today. This webinar is an informational workshop for the Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Program, and we'll go over the agenda and make a few introductions. So for today's workshop, we're going to have an introduction, very brief, about who MPO is, about the program. We'll go over the guidelines for the call for projects. We'll also go over the actual application and provide some guidance and the submittal process. And then TxDOT will provide information on the project initiation. Just to do some introductions today, here with you is Juan Mendive. I'm the interim MPO director. Also from our staff and who will be helping facilitate the workshop, Ms. Gracie Briones, planner with the MPO, and Mr. Julio Nino, also a planner with the MPO. And we have Janice Marquez, who is with TxDOT, and also Ms. Sara Garza with TxDOT, who is our MPO representative. And thank you all for joining. I see Mr. Bettis is here from LISD, so welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So we'll go ahead and get started. And just as a note, like I mentioned, this is being recorded and we'll post it to our website after the session. If you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So for those of you that might not be familiar with the MPO, so who is the Laredo Webb County Area MPO? Our mission is to set transportation-related policy, identify existing and future local transportation needs in cooperation with TxDOT, and propose and recommend projects for all modes of transportation, including mass transit and active transportation, with special attention to freight. The set-aside program mostly covers the active transportation component of our mission. So can give a quick overview about the TSA set-aside program. In urbanized areas with populations over 200,000 and under the bipartisan infrastructure law, this program is from the Transportation Block Grant, provides funds that are distributed to MPOs. These funds can be used for projects such as pedestrian and bicycle facilities, recreational trails, construction of turnouts, safe routes to school, streetscaping, and vulnerable road user safety assessments, traffic calming techniques. And right now, Ms. Briones will talk more about the different eligible projects. MPOs are required to develop a competitive process for selecting these projects, and this is why we have a call for projects. And so now Ms. Gracie Briones will go over the application guidelines. As she'll mention throughout this, we'll allow for questions. We'll go through the sections, and if you have questions at the end of each section, feel free to ask your questions. And you can also enter those questions in the chat box, and I'll be reading those. But thank you all, and any questions you may have, we're here to answer them. So we appreciate your attendance. Ms. Gracie, go ahead.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you. Good morning, all. As he mentioned, I'm going to go over the call for projects guidelines. We have them also in our website, and here's the link. I think Juan or Julio are going to put the link in the chat box for you to have access to the document. The guidelines have these 6 different sections. We're going to go over these sections, A through F, the overview, eligible entities, the eligible projects, the funding and match requirements, what the program call for project sequence of events consists of, and the project implementation. Under the guidelines overview, we're going to find what the TA or Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Funds provide. They give us resources that can help achieve what the FHWA policy provide, like for repairs, rehabilitation, reconstruction, replacement, and or maintenance of existing transportation infrastructure, and especially the incorporation of safety, accessibility, and or connectivity, multimodal, and resiliency features. The guidelines also give us information as to what the set-aside program, the provisions and requirements that we need to follow for the use of these funds. Under section B, which is the eligible entities, we have 8 categories. The entities eligible are local governments, the regional transportation authorities, transit agencies, natural resource or public land agencies, school districts, local education agencies or schools, tribal government, nonprofit entities, also any other local or regional governmental entity with responsibility for oversight or transportation or recreational trails. Going to the section C in the guidelines, we have the eligible project or activities. Activities that are eligible for these funds are transportation, any type of transportation alternative. The recreational trails for program, also known as RTP, the safe route to schools, planning, designing, or constructing boulevards. And ineligible activities are like administrative, the things are administrative, like purposes, promotional activities, routine maintenance and operations, or general recreation and park facilities. And the guidelines will give you more details as to what are the projects or activities that are allowed or the ones that are not allowed. Under the section that talks about funding and match requirements, it is important to know that the TA set-aside program is not a grant. The funds are provided on a cost reimbursement basis of 20% local match in cash. These funds are available for obligation for 3 years. The potential funding available that we have, it's approximate 2.4 million. And this is based on an annual allocation for the years of 22 to 24, plus 300,000 that we have like as carryover from previous years. The funding target for these program is $1 million as a maximum amount award per project. And an example that I have here is the 20% match of $1 million, which is 250,000. And this could be for a project that the total cost of the project is $1,250,000. Now going to the section E of the guidelines, talks about the program call for project sequence of events. We've had several events already that we did the presentation of the guidelines to the Active Transportation Committee. Then we presented the final draft to the Technical Committee. We presented the final draft also to the Policy Committee, and they authorized the call for projects back in September. Now we're holding one of the 2 workshops, and we're going to have another one in person next week. The application deadline for these is November 18th. Then in December, we'll review the applications, and by January 2003, we're anticipating to get the final selection by the Policy Committee. The evaluation and selection process. This is important to know that eligible entities may submit more than one project. The MPO staff will review the eligibility and the application for completeness. Also, a subcommittee will be formed of MPO staff, Active Transportation, and Technical Committee members. These committee will evaluate the projects and will provide recommendation to the Policy Committee for the final selection. The TA set-aside program selection process goes, like I mentioned, the evaluation committee will first evaluate and score each project, and it provide recommendation to the technical committee. Then the technical committee will review these recommendations and will provide a final recommendation to the policy committee for approving and awarding the funding. Now, the evaluation category and scoring criteria. The evaluation of this project or the application that we receive will be based on evaluation criteria, scoring points, and other factors that I'm going to show right now in the following table. This table shows the, I guess in order of like the maximum points to score. The first category is enhancing network connectivity. The scoring maximum points are 20. And this table is also in the guidelines and provides a description and the different factors for each category. The second category is implementing an existing plan with 15 points, improving safety with 15 points, the project readiness with 15 points. The second part of the table shows the promoting health, scoring up to 10 points, reducing barriers, scoring 10 points, creating economic development opportunities, 5 points, then providing environmental benefits, 5 points also, and serving disadvantaged areas, 5 points, for a total of 100 points of each on all categories. I don't know if you want to add anything, Juan or Julio, on this table on the scoring criteria.
Sure. I was just going to add that the application pretty much is tailored in a way to help you address these questions and this criteria. So it's pretty straightforward. I mean, there's in some cases, right, that maybe you feel like your project doesn't completely meet one of them, but just answer, to the best of your ability. And at the end, it's just we're going to look at the overall score of the project that you're doing. So this is just going to help our evaluation committee decide on the different funding awards and the projects that get selected. But hopefully the application is tailored in a way, like I mentioned, that it helps you address this criteria. So we try to create the application in that way. The other thing I wanted to emphasize was that staff is going to be available throughout this process. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Also, if you have questions about the guidelines or something you have a doubt on, just reach out to us. Even when you're working through your application, if you need help with this criteria, like just a question or what examples of what could help meet some of these criterions, feel free to reach out to us. So we'll be available throughout that process. And right now, when Julio goes over the application, I think you'll be able to see how the application was set up in a way that helps you address these different criteria and factors.
Thank you. Yes, the last section of the guidelines, it's called the project implementation. The project implementation will give you some details. Let me go over. The project improvements are limited to those described in the application and as approved by the policy committee. The projects shall be developed following current standards and specifications established or recognized by the federal government and TxDOT. Project applicant or sponsor must enter into a local agreement known as an Advanced Funding Agreement or AFA with TxDOT. And we have Janice from TxDOT that can elaborate on that after my presentation. And shall comply with all federal and state procurement procedures and requirements applicable to development of federal aid transportation projects. It's also important to know that any changes on the item of work of project that occur without advanced policy committee approval will not be reimbursed. The funding is limited to the amount awarded by the MPO policy committee. Any project cost overruns shall be covered by the project sponsor or the applicant, like the agency applying for these funds. The construction contract will in all cases be chosen through a competitive bidding process approved by TxDOT. And the construction contract will be awarded to the lowest responsive bidder. Entities applying must ensure that the project timeline reported is realistic. Then the MPO and TxDOT may request periodic project status reports. Semi-annual reports to the MPO Policy Committee may be required after an entity enters into a project agreement with TxDOT. And I don't know if you have any questions about the guidelines. It's a document that you can find, like I said, in our website. And also, then we have the application, and this is the link for that can also be if Julio or Juan can help me put the link in the chat for the application. And right now I'm going to turn it over to Julio, who helped us with putting the application together, and he can guide us through the way we're gonna be looking at the applications and how is it that it can be filled in.
Thank you, Tracy. I know Mr. Roberts had a question. I think, is it okay if we wait a little bit to the end also after Ms. Marquez gives the presentation, and that way she can also help us answer this. Maybe we can run through an example of how this would look. Is that okay, Mr. Roberts?
That's fine. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I'll let Julio go ahead and continue with the application process, and I'll put the link in the chat box.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Name's Julio Niño. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see part of the presentation or part of the presentation that I have for the application. Okay, just for the application itself, when we're looking at the application, we do recommend that you download and save the application. The reason why is if you open it through the PDF reader on any of your browsers, the problem with that is that if you're filling it out and you click on the links, it will take you to the link without opening a new tab or window, and that erases your entire progress. So we recommend that you download and save it. That way, when you open it through the PDF application, it will actually take you to a browser and open the tabs rather than lose your progress. If you do decide to do it online, then we recommend that you right click and you manually enter that you wanted to open a new tab or window. Okay, so looking at the application links. So when you go through the application, there are some links on here, and these links are going to take you to several of our pages. One thing that I do want to point out is that we have an option for single project locations or multiple project locations. So when you go to the link, it's going to take you to a specific web page that is going to show you the following examples. So when it'll tell you the format in which the MPO recommends uh, that you format your multiple project locations. And by locations, we're talking about the different segment areas. So if you're doing something like an illumination project in Chacon on the Chacon Creek trails, and it's going to be several segments, then that will be multiple locations, even though there's one project, which is the illumination project. But there are several locations. One of them could be by Benavides Park, while another section could be closer to Dryden Park or another area of the trail itself. Okay, and these videos are going to be available for you when you go to the documents on the links. You'll have a full YouTube tutorial as well as the instructions from Google itself. So when it'll tell you how to get to this place right here, to My Maps. It'll tell you how to get started. If you are going to be required to have a Google account in order to access this, and the gist of it is that at the end, when you have a single project location, you should be able to do the following. Copy it, go to the application, and then just paste it on the appropriate number. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move into the application itself. Okay, so go into the application. Now, the application itself has some automated features. So when you write in the project title, let's say, for instance, your project title is going to be, once again, the illumination.
Yeah, the screen's gray right now. Hold on, just make sure.
Let's see. Is it showing?
Not yet. It shows the cursor, but for some reason it's grayed out.
Okay, let me go ahead and reshare. There we go. Okay. So as I was saying, so we have the application itself. Some of these text fields are automated. So when you type in, let's say, for instance, the project title, illumination of Chacon Creek, as our example, and the submitting agency could be Laredo MPO. When you move down, you'll notice that some of these are going to be automatically filled for you. If there is an option for not applicable, so for instance, on number 4, section 1, it's saying that project sponsor or supporting partnership entity, that is for in case you have a project sponsor, such as the city of Laredo. You would click on, you would go ahead and put the name down here. If not, if it's not applicable for you, click not applicable, and the fields will automatically go in there for you. On section B is where you start seeing, or actually, you start seeing some of these links that I mentioned. So you'll see the project location link. So we have the multiple locations instructions. You'll see the format for the multiple project locations. You'll see and that's right here for the project locations. You also have the option to write citywide if it's a project that is going to encompass different areas in the city of Laredo. Number 7 on section B is where you would put the link for Google Maps. If the applicant has access to GIS files, then you would click here and you would share that with us on an attachment. The attachment, we're going to go ahead and ask that you send them to us in a USB along with a digital copy of the application. The project description also has a link with the format instructions. When you get to section C, this is going to be the project cost and project budget summary. So you have the option to either fill out the sample that we have on the application, or you can submit your own project cost and project budget summaries. If you are going to submit your own, you click that you are going to be submitting a preferred your preferred format, and it will automatically populate it for you. So let us know that you are going to provide a preferred work format. Other than that, if you are going to use our sample, you have the options for your work activities. For number 2A, you're going to see that you have eligible expenses, itemized construction cost estimates, where you'll write down your work activities, the quantity, the unit price, the total. When you get the total, when you write down the total on here, and right now it's just something from the when you're going to go write down the total, let's say for instance you have one quantity, whatever work activity you have, and the unit price is $100, it's going to go ahead and do it for you. Right now, it's having a little bit of technical difficulty, so it's not showing the number correctly. But I assure you that when you are applying, it will show. So it'll bring it over to this side, and all these numbers are going to be populated for you. Okay, so for the project criteria, The criteria themselves, they are 9 project criteria, like Ms. Gracie explained. These questions are going to go ahead and start on section Delta. If you need to go back to the validation criteria, you can click on here. It'll take you to the to page 3. So you have the enhancing network connectivity, and you have the questions that go on there, and so on and so forth. I don't know if Juan or Gracie, if you'd like to add anything regarding the criteria.
I think we're good.
Alrighty, moving on. So we go to what's called criteria number 2, implementation of an existing plan, and you have the options to either tell us that whether or not your project is part of a plan that is already a part of a master plan or a governing body, a plan of a governing body, such as that city council, commissioners court, agency boards, such as but not limited to the thoroughfare plan, trails plan, bicycle master plan, etc. Once you get through all these categories, you have your section E, project commitment. Here's it's going to give you a checklist of things that you need to agree to. That you confirm and you understand the following requirements by checking the boxes and signing below. So you click on these boxes. Very important here, it's going to tell you that the application commits that the project is selected for funding. An agreement with TASA will be executed within 1 year from project selection, and the applicant commits to, that if this project is selected for funding, the project will advance to construction within 3 years from selection. From there, the applicant commits that the project selected for funding, the project will be implemented as approved by LW Campo Policy Committee, as well as the project agreement with TxDOT, and the application acknowledges that the Transportation Alternatives Program, the TA set-aside program, is not a grant, and the funds will be provided in a cost reimbursement. The applicant acknowledges they're solely responsible for any project cost overruns and future maintenance and operations of the facility. So you would, once you print it, you can sign it, print name and title of the person that is filling out the application, the date, and then very important on section F, it's going to go and tell you, it'll give you a checklist of the attachments. So depending on what the choices that you took on the application, it gives you a rundown of the attachments from all the way from A through K. Very important, we need 2 signed original hard copies, including attachments, which is required. 1 signed digital scanned copy of the application, including attachments, on a USB drive, as well as all the attachments on the USB drive. Also, last thing, when you're going to print the form, gotta make sure that when you're printing it, that you have your settings to fit. That way, it should be the PDF default. That way, the margins don't cut off. And other than that, if you have any questions regarding the application, please let me know.
Just wanted to remind Julio, I don't know if you can scroll up to the very first, I guess the page after the cover page, that the submittals will have to be hand delivered or mailed to our offices. Yes, the complete application must be mailed or hand delivered during regular business hours too. And that's the information there. Make sure it's before Friday, November 18 at 4 p.m. I don't know if they have any questions, Mr. Perez, Mr. Robert, or anybody else.
I've been asking questions, Ms. Grace, of Mr. Roberts and Mr. Mendive, so I got those answered. Thank you.
I've been answering some stuff in the chat box. That's why you may see me typing away. But right now, Ms. Marquez will go over the AFA, and there's a question about that, right, about the agreement. So she'll give more details about that. was going to mention, like Julio mentioned, there seems to be a little glitch on the worksheet, but remember you can provide your own budget worksheet. You don't need to use ours, but we'll make sure right now it was working before. I don't know what happened, but when you go in, you type the numbers are coming out, but it's looking kind of weird. So we'll make sure to fix that. Since we automated a lot of this, there could be a few glitches. So if you encounter anything when you're, applying, just pick up the phone, email us, and we'll find a quick workaround if there's any issues. But we don't. I think there'll be a quick fix, right, Julio?
Yeah, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we still see it.
Okay, so this is the application on the PDF on the actual PDF application. So when you're doing this, whatever the work activity is, whether it is a anything that falls into the eligible expenses, the itemized construction cost estimates. If, for instance, if you have a quantity of one of whatever that work activity is, the unit price is 100, the total will be calculated for you. Say you have
We're seeing
two.
I see your screen, but I'm seeing the program application where Gracie was talking about the.
For some reason, it keeps glitching out. There we go. All right,
Okay.
so here's the application on the actual Adobe application rather than the reader. The reader for some reason is kind of glitchy. So once again, that's why we advise that you download and save it. And so when you're doing this, when you're typing in the quantity, you have the unit price and unit total. So if the what's called the unit price here would be 2,000, for instance, then it gets calculated here, down here. If you have anything else, any other eligible expenses, itemized additional construction related costs, whatever those costs can be. Once again, I'm just going to do round numbers.
Right.
Right, so you have your two totals, and then down here for the project budget summary, it starts filling it out for you. Depending on what your local match is, say for instance that your local match is going to be, you're going to do the standard 2080. I'll go ahead and calculate that for you. Now, these three right here are going to give us a visual representation down here for the cost participation summary, which is your total project cost estimate at 58,765 with 0 cents. Total local match participation. Now, these numbers, you just go ahead and copy these down here. It's going to be the 2080, exactly as the way they are up here. They don't do anything. That's just representing these two once again. But you get your rundown right here. That's basically what I was trying to show you with the with these two sample worksheets that you have. So they're automated and they do auto-populate down here.
And can you just show again where if they're going to provide their own worksheet, what checkbox they would need to click?
Yes. If you're going to be providing your own worksheet, and I'll go ahead and get rid of some of these numbers. Where I do that, when you're going to provide your own worksheet, what you're going to do is go above over here. Project itemized, check here if a preferred format of the itemized project budget workbook will be included with this application. So we click here, and that will tell us that applicant will provide preferred workbook format. Same thing down here, and for everything else, it will remain blank. And you would just move on, as the application says, just go ahead and move on to the next section.
Thank you, Julio. Are there any questions about the application? As mentioned, we'll be available to answer questions. I know Ms. Briones is the main point of contact, so you can feel free to email her. You can also call her office, but all of us will be available to answer questions.
Just a comment, Mr. Mendive. I know Mr. Roberts is on board, but my concern is the deadline application of November 18th, being that we have to take things to the board. I just don't know if we'll make it on time because we've got to do the agreement first.
Right. So yeah, that agreement, and around Ms. Marquez will talk about it. You have a year to enter into that agreement if you're selected. So if you're able to submit an application I mean, you might need still board approval, right? But maybe it's just approval to submit your application and provide some type of, letter just saying that you'll provide the match. Then you have a year to do the AFA. And Renan Marquez will talk about that. And at that time, that's when you would need that resolution, a formal resolution from the board. So first, if you're selected, and then the funding, then after that, that's when you start that process.
Okay, got it.
So I think we're good. Janice, do you want to go ahead and start your presentation? We have your slides. Do you want us to share your slides or?
Sorry, I was looking for the unmute
It's okay.
button.
You want us to share
Um,
the slides for you, or you'll show them?
I have her PDF file, but I don't know if she prefers to
I think
share.
it will be best if I go over them because I want to click on some of the links that are
Okay.
there.
Perfect.
Okay, feel free to share your screen, and yeah, and Erna will clarify any questions. I know there's some questions about the match, and we'll also clarify the stuff about the resolution stuff in our guidelines. Like I mentioned, it doesn't particularly mention that we need the resolution in hand before the project's awarded, but we need some type of documentation just showing that the match will be provided.
Okay. Let me know if you can see my screen. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Good morning. My name is Janice Marquez, and I am the contract specialist slash, excuse me, TA coordinator for the Laredo district. I'll be going over a very brief presentation. The local government projects, it's a very local government projects program is a very extensive and it has a lot of components. So I will be going over the project initiation process and providing you all with some resources. Let's see. Okay. So a local government project is a transportation project in which at least one phase of the project development is managed by a local government agency for which it is being reimbursed with federal or state funding, which that will be the case in these projects that will be selected by the MPO. It is MPO funding, but it's federal funds that are allocated to the MPO for them to disburse. The phases of the projects include environmental, design, right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation, or construction. So if there's one federal dollar in any of these phases, it is considered a local government project, and we will have to enter into an agreement. This is very important. Even though it's an MPO awarded project, TXDOT maintains oversight responsibility for all the activities performed by the local government. That will be you, the applicant. So we won't be there on your day-to-day activities, but we have to oversee what you're doing. We will ask for documentation, review your processes, and be your guidance for any questions that you may have. This is the local government projects toolkit. And this is a link that will take you directly to the website where this is all explained. So as you see, there's several components. Today we'll be concentrating on the project initiation. And there's different requirements for non-construction projects in case I believe this call for project allows for studies. So that will be considered a non-construction project. Excuse me. Okay, the first step after the MPO policy committee has approved your project and your project has been awarded funding, we will require for you to submit a project identification form, which this is basically a summary of your application. This is what the form looks like, and it's very simple. It would just, with this, we will initiate the assignment of a control section job. It's a project ID. And here it will be entered the date when it was awarded. That's when the policy commission took action. The project sponsor being LISD, UISD, City of Laredo. That would be the consider the project sponsor, which we call the local government. The unique entity ID. This is a new number that replaced the DUNS number. And if you have access to the sam.gov website and you were previously assigned a DUNS number, my understanding is that now that DUNS number was converted to a UEID. So that's what you will enter here. Your address, it is very important that we have your 9-digit zip code. This is for FHWA. They do require that those last 4 numbers. A contact person, the project name, just a simple project name, sidewalks along X Street or pedestrian sign, just simple. The county, which in this case will be web. We would need your estimated letting date. If it's a construction project, by when do you anticipate that you will be going out for bids, for construction bids? As the MPO staff mentioned on their presentation, you have 3 years to move into the construction phase. So plan for that. And project limits, where does it start? Where does it end? And the scope of the project, and more detail as to what you will be doing. Detail, but short, just simplified what your project entails. Over here, this is the summary of the budget. The call for project allows for reimbursement of the engineering fees, your preliminary engineering, that will be your design, environmental. In here, if you are awarded funds for those phases, you will select here tab, which is category 9. Your total. This is, let's see. No, it is the other way around. So as the MPO staff mentioned, this is an 80-20. If you calculate that your preliminary engineer will be 10,000, 80% of that will be federal, 20% of that will be local. Will you be seeking reimbursement for this section? Yes. So like I mentioned, this is once your project has been awarded. I may be going too much into detail, but just so for you to familiarize with this, with what we require. You will sign here that whoever prepared the form. Now, this needs to match your budget on your application. It is very important that your budget matches all across your project, like from your application, any reports that you submit from your governing bodies. If there's a resolution, all the amounts need to match. This form will be reviewed by the MPO, and the MPO will submit to TechStop for us to create that CSJ number. So that is what the project identification form entails. Next, there is, once the CSJ has been issued, there's an oversight level special approval form that needs to be completed. This is required by our contract services division in order to review the draft. In order to review the draft of the agreement, we cannot initiate an AFA without this form. In essence, in this form, what you will be doing, you will be describing your experience with previous projects. You will describe your approach as to how you're going to manage the selected project. You will assign a project manager. This project manager does not have to be a local government employee. However, the responsible person in charge must be a full-time employee. And this responsible person in charge is the person that we're going to contact in case of any questions with the project. Then state also requires that there's a qualified person working in this project. I'll go over in the next slide. So the local government will complete Part A, which is pages 1 through 4. Open in the wrong window. Sorry. Okay, it's taking a little while to open. There it is.
Yeah.
So this is the
Got it.
form. Here you will enter your the CSJ, which was previously assigned.
Yeah, hold on. It's still not, still not showing.
Showing it? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why it's doing that on WebEx. Like it stays stuck on the last screen you had.
Mm,
You want to
let's
refresh it or stop sharing and share it again the way Hulu did it previously.
yes.
I don't know why it's doing that. So yeah, I was just gonna mention. So again, this is all after your project is selected, right? I know it does seem like a lot of steps, but it's after the project's selected, and TechStop staff is very helpful in guiding you through that process as well. There we go.
Okay. Yes, so this is all after the project has been awarded, but it's important things to consider because we cannot move on to the AFA part without this. So like I was saying, this is where you will describe the project. Again, your estimated project cost, your budget's very important. And here will be 80% federal, 20% local. Here you will select the phases of the project that you will be managing, describe your approach to manage your project, and you'll mention two projects that the local government has previously managed. They don't have to be federally funded, but if they are TechStop projects will be better. But it's not required. This is where it provides the information regarding the RPIC, the responsible person in charge, where it mentions that it must be a full-time employee of the local government. These slides will be available on the MPO website, and all the links are here in case you want to go over them at more thoroughly, slowly on your own time. I know right now your main concern will be the application and getting these projects awarded.
Yeah, but it's, as you mentioned, it's important, right, for them to note everything that goes into it, because sometimes we've had that issue in the past where you have project applicants but then it's a long process after they're awarded, and then the costs go up. So it's, you got to consider that time as well in your cost estimates.
Yes. And for you to account for all this when you anticipate your estimated letting, and to see if your project will be ready for letting at the required time. Okay, after we receive the Part A, TechStop will complete Part B of the form. This is where we evaluate the information that you have submitted, where we determine if the projects that you are mentioning are comparable to what you're doing, and if your experience complies or meets the requirements of this project. It's important to be aware that we do assign a risk score. It does not mean that it's not a grade. It does the score, it's measured in A, B, C, and D. It does not mean that you are failing, but it is used to determine if, in simple terms, if awarding federal funds to your local government puts us TechStop at risk. Remember that on the first slides I mentioned that we maintain oversight responsibility. So anything that happens with the project, we answer to FHWA. This is federal funds, and that's why we have to determine a risk score. How is this calculated? How is this measured? Well, there's important several different components, such as the communication between DLG and TxDOT. If you provide report, if you are following the federal requirements, just compliance with what the federal guidelines say. And it does not mean that you're failing. Sometimes local governments may be like, oh, well, you gave me a D, that looks really bad. Like, it's just measuring the risk that we are taking by allocating funding to your project. Okay, we get to the advanced funding agreement. Once we receive that special approval form, oversight special approval form, we will move on to drafting the agreement. I will be taking care of that based on the information that we gather from your application, your project information form, and the special approval form. Once I will submit this, once the AFA has been drafted, I will submit this to the local government for review, for their comments. Once we concur in everything, this will be submitted to contract services for review. It does not take that long. I mean, I say it's not that long, will be probably 4 weeks. But we've learned that what takes the longest, it's the resolution. Because the local government must pass a resolution, which is ordinance or commissioner court's order, which will identify the project, identify the funding source. It should not mention a specific project cost, and authorize the local government to enter into the AFA. And it must identify the authorized signatory. So once we receive this resolution, we will incorporate it to the agreement, and we will arrange for electronic signature via DocuSign. We do not wet ink signatures anymore. Everything's electronically signed, and we will arrange for that. This is a sample of the resolution. As you can see, it's very short, and it mentions the governing body entering into an advanced funding agreement with the state for highway safety improvement funds. In this case, will be transportation alternative projects. And it mentions that it's an estimated cost. The word estimated must be there. And like Gracie was mentioning, plus any cost overruns. Overruns are always a responsibility of the local government. So it is important that your estimate, it's very close to actual cost, to your estimate, it's accurate as best as you can. We know that with the price increases that have been going on, it may be difficult, but try to account for those price increases. Okay, regarding the qualified person, there is a training, a local government projects procedures training. And you need to have at least one individual working actively and directly on the project that needs to be certified. The training must be completed before federal funding is authorized. We will not reimburse you for any expenses incurred if the training requirements are not met. And let's see, I hope this will work. I have here
Just for clarification, when you say that training must be completed before the federal funding is authorized, that means before you enter into the AFA, right? Or
No.
when exactly?
That means before you start spending federal money.
Okay. I just want to point that out. So it's not something that's to be done before they submit an application to us or
No.
are awarded by the policy committee.
Yeah, on your guidelines, you are allowing them for a year
Right.
to enter into the agreement. So during that time, they can identify the
So,
person that will be.
so for like entities like the city of Laredo,
Mhm.
um, so let's say there's a one department, like let's say engineering is submitting, as long as someone at the city is certified, or does it have to be someone from that department
Working directly with the project,
with the project? Okay.
actively and directly working on the project.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mhm. Are you able to see my screen regarding training catalog?
No, it stayed on the last one again.
Let's stay on the last one.
Yeah. I'm not sure why it's doing that, but I apologize
Yes.
about that.
How about that?
It's showing your meeting window,
Oh,
so we see all of our faces.
sorry about that.
It's okay. There we go.
Okay. So this is the training catalog, and here you will click on this link, local government projects procedures, and it will give you the trainings available. As you can see, we are booked now through January. And this is actually an in-person. You can do it virtual. It doesn't have to be one for the Laredo district. You can attend any of these, and all of them cover the same information. What else do I have here? If you are aware of a coworker, employee that has already been certified, you can look for them on this report. You can just search by name or by agency name, and you should be able to find them there. It will tell you the date when they were certified. Okay. Now let me switch to Juan, you asked about federal funding regarding the training must be completed before federal funding is authorized. So in order for you to start spending the funds, you must be approved by FHWA. And we do that by requesting, we TechStart do that, take care of that process by requesting a Federal Project Authorization and Agreement, FPAA, which is we call it the Federal Letter of Authority. And this is the document that must be in place before you can start spending your federal funds. Anything incurred prior to the issuance of this document will not be eligible for reimbursement. And this is what the form looks like. It will have a Laredo district. They will assign different project numbers for different purposes. It will have the CSJ, project description, and then over here, this is what we look for. We look for that the federal FHWA has assigned federal dollars to this project. For example, on this project, the local government is authorized to spend $16,000, of which 80% it's federal and 20% will be covered by the locals. If you spend, and it's very important, I almost forgot here, it determines the phase of the project that it's being approved. So everything's done in phases. First, we approve that your engineering phase. If there's right-of-way acquisition, then that will be done separately. And then the construction phase will be done separately as well. So if you have been awarded an FPAA for preliminary engineering, you cannot spend these funds on your construction phase. This is more going into the project itself and to the development of the project, but it's a very common question that I just wanted to address here. For procurement of engineering services, the local government must follow qualification-based selection process. If in your project application you're requesting funding for the design of your project, you must follow these requirements. If your agency is already receiving federal funds, most likely you already have something like this in place. You already have a policy in place. We would need to review that policy and make sure that it meets all of the requirements of 23 CFR Part 172 and the Texas Government Code Subchapter 2254A. We will review your policy. We will let you know, yes, your policy meets the requirements. You're authorized to proceed with advertisement for requests for qualifications for your project. Once that has been done, you will go through your process according to your policy, because once you've gone through your process, we will come back and review that you follow that process. If you did not follow the process that you have already in place, these expenses will not be eligible for reimbursement. So it has happened when the local government does have a policy in place. However, for X reason, they deviate from their policy. And at the review, we realized that they did not follow the process. So they have to go through the advertisement process again and procure for another request for qualifications. Okay, this is regarding the project accounting. The local government is responsible for keeping accurate financial records and documentation. Yes, the local government will be submitting requests for reimbursements to TxDOT. However, that does not mean that TxDOT is the office of record. This is your project and you are responsible for keeping all these project records. The new state requirement is 7 years after the project has been closed out. So you must maintain this project record for 7 years after you close the project. The local government will make advance payments to TxDOT to cover direct state costs. That it's part of your application. I believe the MPO, it's including 15% of the project cost to cover direct state costs. What will be covered with this funding? It will cover our review for the project. Like mentioned, we maintain oversight responsibility of the project. So it will cost for our review, and the amount that you submit, it's estimated. If there's additional expenses to that, we will come back and ask you for additional funds. Same way, if there's any leftover, any remaining balances, at the end of the project, we will issue a check for whatever was not spent. And we do not charge our time like we should sometimes. So we do help the local governments. Don't think that we will be requesting for additional funds very often. It also depends on the coordination that is required on your project, the size of your project. We're considerate of local governments. After project completion, the TxDOT will coordinate a project reconciliation according to the terms of the agreement. So we will go back to the budget page, to your estimated budget, and determine if there's any funds that are due to you or additional funding due from you. Very important, if the local government withdraws from project, the local government will be responsible for any expenses incurred. Any coordination that was done, anything that TxDOT has already incurred expenses on the project, you will be 100% responsible for that. And we're back to where we started. So, like I mentioned, that was a very brief, not so brief, presentation regarding project initiation. There's other components as the project moves to the different phases of the project. And I've included here the link. On this link, you can find a lot of resources and guidance.
Yeah, and I added it to
regarding-
the chat box as well.
Mm,
And
is it this one?
yeah, I added that in the chat box earlier. Put it again. And like you mentioned, we'll share this on our website, and I'll email it to those that are in attendance here.
Yes, there's a lot of resources here. This is an interactive um, website, so it will take you project initiation, the policy, it will tell you what needs to be done. That's the manual. I did not want to click on that. Why and how. So there's, you don't want to get into the specifics. You just tell me what I need to do. You go into the best practices, and it'll give you a summary as to what is required of you and how you can achieve that, whatever it is that we're working on for the phase of the project. And under forms and publications, there's a lot of resources available regarding local government projects and the project management guide. So sorry, navigating through all this stop sharing. I need to figure out how to do it better.
There's not one right way. We all try
Right.
different ways.
Okay. So we're at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, let me know. I've left my contact information here in case you have any questions later on or at this time. I believe, Juan, you received some questions on the chat box.
Yes, and thank you, Janice, for being here today and going over the presentation. I think it's good. Like you mentioned, it was a brief overview, but yeah, it's good that you went into details because it's an important part of that process. I know we work closely together, and I think it's better if we start all working together right early in the process, right, instead of later in the process. That's why it was very important to us that there'd be text dot representation here today. So thank you again for attending, Janice and Sara, and you're here as well. So we appreciate that. There was a question, and I wanted to leave it till the end so we can go over all this. I know Mr. Roberts asked about the Sierra Middle School project that they're doing. So, Mr. Roberts, I don't know if you want to maybe explain a little bit what you had in mind. What I'm thinking, if you're thinking about the entire construction project, the 20% match would have to be of the eligible project cost. So since it's eligible project, right, it would have to be like the transportation components of it and open to the public. So not within the school itself, because I know it closes right in the afternoon. So I don't know if you want to maybe just explain briefly.
Yeah, I just basically mentioned that because, just brainstorming because I'm thinking like if LIZ has multiple smaller projects, you know, it wouldn't make sense to like do an application for each project. It would make sense to do one application for all the other projects. But then I was thinking, well, I know that they have already purchased the land to do the new Cigarro middle school, and I don't know if our construction department, our division has looked into the possibility of what areas of construction or utilities or anything might be as to maybe target that particular project, being that it's a much larger construction project and obviously is going to have more needs of a lot of these things that this application applies to. So, just thinking out loud, I know the question from Mr. Pettis before he left the meeting was, the match. Obviously is something that would have to be addressed with our school board. And since we don't have our assistant superintendent for division here in the meeting, we're going to have to relay a lot of this to them to see what they may have already had on their improvement planning, their long-term planning for district projects and whatnot before we even begin to even consider initiating the application. So, there was just some, again, just some brainstorming ideas about how we could see where this fits into our particular school district and what would be most beneficial, obviously, to the partners that we'll have, including the city, obviously, because, most of the right of way and stuff are, on city streets and whatnot around the schools. And how it best fits also the MPO long-term project with the bike trails and so on and so forth for the community. So, it's just kind of an overall just, brainstorm thought about, while this larger project might, encompass the opportunity to do an application specifically for that, and then maybe the smaller projects on another application perhaps. I really not sure right now, just kind of looking at everything, if, we can have multiple projects within the application for smaller issues of, let's say one facility might need some utilities, another one might need some crosswalks, another one may need, some pedestrian designated areas or bike, right of ways and stuff, which obviously would involve the city. So right now it's just a brainstorming thought process because this does look very detailed in what's being asked. And I'm not really sure what the district might have earmarked in the way some areas, and then also the city, because obviously we don't want to overlap things that maybe the city's going to be doing versus what we had plans for. So we're going to have to definitely coordinate a lot with you all, with the city, in regards to a lot of the right of way and stuff. So, those are just some of the concerns. Obviously, we're going to have more discussion about. And then the timeline of the application, which always throws me off. We usually get 30 days, maybe 60 days, and we're fortunate to have a deadline of submission. But November 18th is like the Friday just before we go on our Thanksgiving break. So it puts a crunch in the timeline to actually get an application submitted and identify projects. It's not impossible. It just, it just throws me into that thought process with, just brainstorming some ideas of how we can actually manage getting an application submission done that's sufficient enough with the information being requested to where it at least has an opportunity to be considered. So that's pretty much my thoughts on that.
Right. Yes, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I mean, like I've mentioned before, what we want is make sure that we get projects that can be realized within the timeline, right? And so if we feel like there's a project that, might not, there's still a lot of details that, are pending, maybe it's better to leave that project for a future round of funding. There will be other opportunities, also depending on how many applications we get and how much funding is provided in this round. There'll be future opportunities, right? So if there's only a few projects and there's still funding available, we'll have to open another call for projects. But then we've also been wanting to emphasize smaller projects that maybe, don't require, so much heavy lifting. So things like that, like you mentioned, crosswalks. I don't know if you already have right-of-way agreements with the city, but I mean that could help if you already have some of those in place to help you be a little bit more project ready. Um, and a lot of the details, I mean, it's good to have them for the application, get selected for the project, but a lot of the details are going to be needed after the fact, right? Like after you would get selected. But we understand on the timing. That's something we had discussed as well. Usually this is about the time frame that's given, but we'll definitely take that into consideration for future call for projects. And I think our committees, as I had mentioned before, they had kind of, suggested, put the deadline before Thanksgiving because nobody wants to be working on it during Thanksgiving. So that's why we did that. But we'll take all that into consideration. Janice, I don't know if you want to address something from what Mr. Roberts mentioned. The other thing I was going to mention is, again, the cost would be those eligible project costs. So let's say you're working on something that's a crosswalk or the sidewalks, then your total cost for that specific component would require that 20% match. So not the overall construction of the middle school, right? It would just be, let's say you just want to apply for the sidewalks around the middle school, something like that. And again, if you do have right-of-way agreements with the city already, I mean, that could potentially help you, and you can provide that documentation in the application. And Janice, you want to address any of that on the right-of-way? I know that.
Well, I'm not really sure. And see, that's the thing too, is that, I'm just off the top of my head and thinking of the application process and everything that, I would suggest once we meet with the cabinet members to probably prioritize and target maybe a small project to get familiar, get our feet wet with the application before we pursue like much larger projects. Since we've never done this before, everybody likes to jump in feet first, but I think, and just brainstorming some of the ideas and wrapping around it without really knowing what the district's long-term plan is, my response to, if we have a committee meeting and discuss this, would be probably to target something much smaller in scale, so it would be much easier to manage and it's easier to define versus just not really knowing right now what the district priorities are in any particular area. I know we talked about those pedestrian overpasses with the railroads and stuff. I know that's always been an issue on their minds. That could be something that maybe we target with the application specific, or if they have more urgent projects that are dealing with, public safety, the pedestrians, the bicycles and whatnot as well. So that's just, just food for thought. Would probably, and my recommendation would be maybe to prioritize and shoot for smaller projects at smaller amounts. Off the bat before we start looking at larger projects, because once you get familiar with that grant application process or the application process itself, it makes it easier the second time and third time around, right?
Right. Exactly. And that's why we want to, work closely with, our stakeholders and potential applicants. And, we're always open to ideas. And like I've mentioned before as well, right? We can always see if there's maybe other funding sources as well for other projects. The other thing I was going to mention, and I've mentioned it too, was about, and Janice also mentioned it, right? It's not only construction projects. Most of this is tailored towards construction, right? Engineering, but there is opportunities to do like safety assessments, studies, and also when it comes to safe routes to schools, I know that that's allowed also to do like a educational program related to safe routes to school. So being a school district, that's potentially something that you could also look into. So that with that question, and I don't know, Janice, if you're going to answer something else, but with that question, I was going to also ask if maybe you can just mention what are some of the big differences in the whole process for the AFA between a construction and a non-construction project? Is there something that's very different? It's basically the same.
It's the same process. It's still an AFA will have to be created. It is a different template, but that will be tailored to just address a non-construction project. But it is the same process. We do have to follow an AFA process. I also wanted to add about the small projects that I don't know if you allow this, Juan, under your guidelines, but for the state call for projects, we do allow for projects to be grouped together, like little projects, like if you need crosswalks in one school and then another sidewalk on the other, you can group them in one application, just as long as you specify what you're doing, the location of each of the projects. You have to be very certain that those are the improvements that you want to do, because once the application it's approved, once your project is awarded, you cannot modify this, or, I mean, you could, but you have to gather MPO policy committee approval. And it's not guaranteed that they will allow you to modify the scope of your project, the switch locations or alter the scope.
Thank you, Janice. So we do allow, like you mentioned, for multiple projects, and like Olga had mentioned at the beginning, if there's different locations, you can put the multiple project locations. So if you package it as one project, you can do that. Or you could also submit separate applications. We just ask that if there's separate applications that you just give us a priority, right? Like which one's your highest priority from all the projects submitted. But we do allow for that.
Yes, and regarding the project, the railroad bridge, that those railroad agreements take a long time. And well, that project could be very expensive. I don't know if that will be within the funding that's available for this call for projects. Just to consider.
We do have that on the application. We do ask that if they are having any railroad projects that we do ask how far along they are, like if they have at least a letter of commitment.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there other questions or anything else that anybody wants to address? Thank you. I know, Gracie, do we have our contact information too, or you want to put it in the chat box? Or
I can put it in the chat. Yes.
thank you. And again, they're on. We also shared the link to the website. What we'll do after we're going to add this recording to the website, we'll go ahead and add the presentations to the website. But we'll also, like I mentioned, send an email to those in attendance with the resources that were shared here. So we'll go ahead and send that after the meeting today. If there's no other questions, I want to thank everybody for your participation. Thank you for the presenters and our guests today. Again, staff will be here to answer any questions. And, if we have any questions specific to TxDOT, Janice has her contact information on the screen, or you can also reach out to us and we'll coordinate with TxDOT. But we want to, I know it's a lot of details, like Mr. Roberts mentioned, but we want to make the process as smooth as possible for those that are applying. Again, we thank you all for your time, and you all have a good weekend. And Ms. Bedouin has just shared her contact information on the chat box, and we'll go ahead and include all that in the email as well. So thank you all very much for attending today's informational workshop about our TA set aside call for projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.